Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everyone. Talos Mobius, your host, as always. Uh, Today we're gonna be doing something slightly different. Today we're gonna be talking about the tips and tricks for new players that are not really often spoken about. For those that are curious, I'd just take some notes. There's some things here may be interesting. We're gonna be talking about things under the hood rather than necessarily talking about stats that are available, skills which you can really easily figure out. We're going to be talking about how skills work well together and modifiers and everything along the way. So, we're going to begin by talking about something pretty simple where it's not really talked about, and that is the levels of stagger that GBO2 has to offer. It's something that is not often talked about, but it is something that I think that it's very necessary to be talked about. You don't hear often about like what stages of stun there are, and that's a big deal. Like you hear that something has a heavy stagger, and everyone is fine with it. So let's look at it really quickly. So the choice is the Gym Seeker space type, and the reason why is it has all of the stuns that we're going to be talking about first. So let's begin by looking at the different levels of stun. Starting off, we have usually weapons like Vulcans, machine guns, and everything of the likes. They do no stun. You see that pretty much there is a stun bar, but that's because it's a build-up stun. Build-up stun can be done with literally most weapons. Very few weapons just have no build-up stun, but those are usually heavy stagger, melee, and the likes. Then we have the flints, where if you notice, when you shoot the mobile suit, there is a minor twitch. That can cause an enemy to not be able to dodge roll, or to be forced to force inject, or to be unable to shoot their weapon for that moment. It's an inconvenience, but many people always wonder, why am I getting sorted and I cannot dodge roll? Why is the dodge roll not going to activate? You're getting flinched. The next is an instan. An instan is a ranged weapon based stun, which is done by literally firing a beam shot. The charged beam shot or some weapons have an instant overall, bazookas, and the like. Once again, build up stun can be done with different weapons, which we talked about earlier, and it's usually superior to instant because there are some units, like for an example, the unit I'm playing, which have maneuver armor, shock dampeners, and skills like that, where they're immune to instants, and you have to build them up, except for heavy staggers, which the heavy stagger is here. A heavy stagger is a stun that is on the second highest level, only below the topple. This heavy stagger is performed, as you notice, by some whips, some ranged weapons, and some melee weapons. But it's not always a guaranteed thing to have. Then there is the tackle stun, which usually stuns everything except for something very specific, like a prone mobile suit. So if you're prone, you cannot be tackle stunned, or if you're performing a skill called quick turn. Finally, there is the topple, which is this. The topple is the last level of quote unquote stun, where pretty much when you fall on the floor after being toppled or countered, you are stuck there. You cannot do anything but wait until your mobile suit stands up again. And in the process, the enemy can hit you if I had landed that whip, but you get the point. Multiple levels of stun, different weapons have different levels of stun, so always remember you can send some weapons together so that you won't really waste all of your rounds. See? Know what works well together, and you can make a lot of weapons work well together without having to expend too much. That's weapon combinations, though, and that's up to you to figure out what works best for you, especially. Because some people just may want to get a really quick stun like this, and maybe you want to unleash those missiles and get the Vulcans. See what works well with you, and always take your mobile suits through practice to figure these out. Now, up next, we have a different style of talking because this is the first stage of understanding the game. Just the stun alone, which is a very major component of the game, I think is a necessity that many do not really look at. So, up next, we're going to look at the skills. Now, there is a variety of skills, but there are a few that stand out more than the rest, and you're going to hear very often that people either take for granted or they at times think, oh, this unit doesn't have this, or oh, this unit has that. And these are usually the skills that you're going to notice the most. Very often, you're going to notice that, for an example, some units have force injectors and some do not, and that's because that increases your mobility. And again, mobility is power in video games. Always remember that mobility is power. Maneuver armor, once again, another very powerful skill in the aspect of you can take insta stuns and survive them without getting stunned in most cases. Build up stun, heavy stagger, and melee stuns, all of that can still go through, although they're diminished by one level, meaning a heavy stagger will become a normal stun, and everything else will just be as is. A melee stun ignores maneuver armor because it's not um, a ranged weapon. So as you notice, it says ranged attacks. So melee will go through regardless. There are some ranged melee weapons that will be entirely ignore that. Like for an example, the butterfly edges of the moon and the Vargol, which were pretty much beam boomerangs, are considered melee weapons. The whips or wires, the those like the sea serpent that the Gymnite Seeker Space Type V that I was using, that's considered a melee. So you gotta find out what is what. And obviously, to do that, when you're looking at a mobile suit, you have to go into the stats of the unit itself, and you're gonna have to look at what is obviously what you're looking for. Because you may be thinking to yourself, how do I know what weapon is what? Well, as you can see right there, it says weapon type. For an example, the beam rifle is just beam, but the butterfly edges, which are literally ranged boomerangs with even a range under it, and it says that it is a melee weapon. Same happens with other units, something like the silver bullet right here, where if we look at the wired hand beam saber, you'd think that's a melee weapon. It's not. It's considered a ranged attack. So it says beam ammo type. Therefore, it's a ranged weapon. So always expect the unexpected with some of these weapons. Do not look at them and think, it doesn't work that way. It's because it wasn't intended to. So let's go back to the skills really quickly just to figure some things out. Another skill is anti-plus stabilizer. With anti-plus stabilizers, they're always fun because you can get a lot more scrappy. You can be more in melee fights without getting stunned by an exploding enemy or allied mobile suit that would normally stagger you if you were hit. That is a guaranteed heavy stagger, and even if you're maneuver armoring past it, you're gonna still get stunned regardless, stopping your momentum. High performance balancer may be one of the most useful skills in the game, and yet nobody wants to admit it yet, as you're able to cancel your boosting, which you learn very quickly. It's a very important part of the game. You can cancel your boosting with melee or tackle attacks, and same with landing from a jump or just landing from a building drop or anything of the sort. Emergency evasion system, it's one of the most used skills, and people who get the most excited when they see it, where it gives you a guaranteed roll, which gives you iframes. Most people say it's one of the most necessary skills to have, and units at higher cost that don't have that suffer. But I want to raise you things like the enhanced double zeta, where people sometimes will call it weak, and then yeah, you get the area. Things like the Gustav Karl also do not have dodge roll, aka emergency evasion system, and yet they can make themselves work. Many supports can make it work because of their high modifiers in their weapons, and so on and so forth. Observational data link. Observational data link is a very useful skill. If you do not have a support, at least get a general or a raid that has that skill, because that way you can see the HP of enemies captured on the radar, and you can get a general idea of where they are by just looking at where their health bars are, making it a lot easier to predict where they're trying to pick around. High spec comeback, that's a must have in space. All space units have it, or units that are capable to go to space. And there are even some units that don't have it, which is really weird. There was a recent release which was the DJ Liu and Co. or DJ for those that prefer that, which it's a ground only unit, but it had high spec AMBAC on release. It's been removed since then, but it was a really funny thing, honestly. So glad that was fixed though. Finally, the skill that I have here that always makes me happy to see is the melee combo controller. Landing multiple hits at times after a stun makes it easier to hit like a neutral into a backswing or downswing for those that prefer that, and allows you to get better into melee combos. A unit with all of the skills described here is usually one of the better units out there, in all honesty, if not one of the best. But that's just my opinion, obviously. Now, remember that some of these do not apply to supports, or they do not apply to some generals. Some generals lack things like maneuver armor, but they are still really good. And there are very rare supports with the actual emergency evasion system. But you'll see supports that have the rest of the skills explained here, except for maneuver armor. Emergency evasion system, it's given to, for example, the Zeta Gundam HML with a high mega launcher. That when it goes into biosensor and it gains double dodge roll, but the rest of the supports get a skill called resist move, which is a dodge roll without the iframes. Yikes. Maneuver armor you won't really see on supports. The only support that has it currently is the full armor double Zeta during biosensor J. So very specific things that you're gonna have to look at. There are a lot of gimmicks with different mobile suits. So talking about the gimmick suits individually is going to be a difficult one. Up next, what we're gonna be talking about is stats and modifiers. Now, as you're gonna notice here, I have the Daijelion core type where it has a very high amount of melee strength and minus 500 HP. The reason why, before your question, it is just a specific part which increases the melee attack damage dealt to enemy units by 5% and reduces the damage dealt to enemies by 3% and the health by over 500. Now you may be thinking, why is that not shown anywhere? Well, you see, GBO2 or Mobile Suit Gundam Operations 2 has hidden modifiers which usually dictate how much damage you're gonna do with some weapons. So we're gonna take the exact same build without that modifying part. So we're gonna up it to, let's look at this. So we're gonna give it every possible modifier that we can put on this. We're gonna give it again the special leg armor level 4 that we've given it, as you notice here. We're gonna give it the melee armor uh, 3, and then I'm gonna give it a little bit of HP so that we can at least understand where we're standing with that same build. So now with our mobile suit chosen, let's proceed to free practice, and we're gonna go to 600 so that we have a mobile suit that is equal to our own to understand what is going on and what we're doing with modifiers. Again, different mobile suits have different modifiers. For those curious, I will over time fill those in some documents for new mobile suits as they come in, because unfortunately, as I stand right now with work, I cannot fill it up quickly enough unless people are willing to do that for me, which I don't want to put that weight on someone. First of all, to always understand this, the beam rifle does 1,287 damage, and the beam saber does 4,308. And because of the 15% damage increase, we get a little bit of damage. Now, we couldn't do extra damage because the skill called special leg buffers, where if I shoot the torso, I do 67 damage, but if I shoot the leg, I do 56. So for me to shoot the true damage, I'd have to hit torso, and then torso again, 4,954 because of a special skill called the Pursuit Melee Auxiliary Program. Already you see that I'm throwing a lot of words your way. I'm throwing a lot of names, and that doesn't really say anything. That's the problem with GBO2. So let's look at it again, right? We're gonna look at once again the other skill. So let's remember 4,308 damage and 1,287 for the melee and the beam rifle. We're gonna use once again the 600 Daije as our target, and we're gonna pretty much put on the special part that we've had earlier with the modifier increase. So let's look at it really quickly, shall we? So once again, the beam rifle has reduced damage, so if I hit the torso, it should do a decent chunk less. 1,248. That's not much damage reduction, but let's hit our backswing. Our backswing did already 4,523 and 5,221. Even our Vulcans from 67, they should drop down by like 1 or 2 damage, maybe 3. See? 3 and 4 on the legs. So 67 on the torso went to 64, and from 58 on the legs we went to 54. Now there are different modifiers, which if you land multiple strikes, you do reduce damage, but when you combo all of those strikes together, they do a large chunk of damage. Obviously, again, because of modifiers, I think that this Wappa is a bit too short. Yep, there we go. As you noticed, I normally would do for 9,673, but the modifier of the damage reduction from something like the Daije plus its melee resistances will make my total damage reduced. There is a skill called the heavy attack. You see that those 4 lines that kind of seem like I'm about to charge up a beam rifle, but with a melee weapon? Well, that's called a heavy charge. A heavy charge is one of the highest melee priority attacks. So even if you have, let's just say, level 2 melee priority with a unit, a heavy attack will always have, I guess you could say, like a level 4 or a 5 or a level heavy. That's the best way to put it. But landing that heavy attack, you will notice that I hit multiple strikes, which I missed to. And yet, my damage already was much better than that of when I was hitting with a normal backswing. The reason why is the modifiers of a heavy attack are either split into multiple strikes or it's just one singular strike that does a lot of damage. The enhanced double zero, for an example, has a modifier of 900%. That means 9 times the damage of your normal melee attack. That is absurd. You need to understand that. Forgive me, I had a minor hiccup. But that is that there is the different types of stuns and different types of modifiers. Never look at a suit and decide that it's bad because of oh its damage is too low, or because oh the performance of it seems to be kind of iffy. Always look at the final modifiers of the unit, because at times something that you might not like on paper might feel amazing on the field. Regardless of that, this is the first step of understanding the different types of stuns and the different types of modifiers. Always remember that this is a bit more on the advanced side, but that if you wish to be on the competitive scene, it's good to know what's under the hood of a game. It's something that I've noticed that not a lot of people talk about, and I think that it's a pity that not a lot of people talk about it. But we need to know the different types of stun, how different mobile suits can use different types of stun. For an example, like the floodlight or pretty much the flashbang for the Tides Liu and Co, where you can shoot it while boosting. But overall, always remember that there is so much to this game that looking at the surface of the game, you will not see the most out of it. There is a lot of this game has different parts doing taking reduced damage, so you have to guess or hope of where you're gonna shoot. Even for an example, the back binders. If I'm look at the damage reduction, back binder, so 20 damage less. But I'm just rambling now. Therefore, to cut my rambling before it goes worse, the video already has been 20 minutes. I hope you enjoyed. As always, have a great day, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Have a great day.